We are live across Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter for the very first time on this Domo Lunch and Learn. We're so excited you've joined us. I have got two fantastic TSMs from our technical service team. Can't wait to dive in on building curated and interactive Domo dashboards. A great way to start your 2023. But before we do that, and before I introduce our good friends, a little bit of preview there. Look at that. I was a little quick to trigger on making sure the screen was shared and making sure you guys were available. But that's my fault. This is the first time we're doing it. We're going to work the kinks out as we do these lunch and learns. Domo Palooza. I'm going to say a word, and I'm going to let the viewers get really excited about that. Domo Palooza, I'm excited to announce, is now live and registration ready. So this will be a virtual live and on-demand event on March 29th. We're super excited to announce this year's theme, Multiply Your Impact. Now, this theme is going to come to life across the keynotes, product announcements, customer spotlights, and community, including awards, virtual networking, and a one-in-a-lifetime birds of a feather conversational topics throughout the entire event. We have some key upcoming dates. So if you're a paper and pencil type of person, if you like to take digital notes, now is the time. domopalooza.com is live. And I will actually put that link down below in the comments of this live stream so everyone will be able to click that link and register. But before you do that, because we have some exciting content today, or maybe throw this in the background while you're registering for Domo Palooza. domopalooza.com is live. We'll put those in the comments down below. But again, I have two fantastic presenters, Jacob Folsom and Dan Britton, here to talk today about dashboards and all of the things that it has to offer. Dan Britton is a senior technical success manager. Jacob Folsom is a manager of technical solutions. Domo employees that we will be bringing you every week for the foreseeable future on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you might get sick of all of the content we're starting to throw your way, but this is a part of our 2023 initiatives to make sure that you're getting all the content you need to be supported in our platform here at Domo. Jacob and Dan, thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited. Let's talk a little bit about what you do. Dan, if you'd like to go first, give us a little bit about what the TSM team does, what your day-to-day looks like at Domo, and then Jacob, I'll let you follow up and you guys can take it from there. But thank you guys so much for joining me.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us. Yeah, I'm Dan Britton, and I'm one of our technical solution managers. And what that means is we just work really closely with our customer success managers and with our customers to make sure that our customers are getting great value out of the product. So that means we do a lot of training and enablement. We love to just work with our customers and help them find ways to solve their business problems using the Domo product. I've been here at Domo about 4.5 years, and previously part of our consulting team. So I did implementations of Domo for our customers, and then I've been on this technical solution team for coming up on 2 years. Anyway, thanks a lot, Eddie. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Again, we're going to work out all of the kinks as we go through these. They will get better as time goes on. Like a fine wine, they say, right? We are better with age. These lunch and learns are going to be coming to you every week, every Tuesday and Thursday, like I said. And again, also welcome Jacob to the live stream.
Yeah.
Jacob, tell us a little bit about what you do at Domo and
Sure.
Some of the things that you're excited about, and then we can jump right into this session.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Eddie, and thanks, Dan, for introducing yourself there. So I run the technical solutions team, of which Dan's a part. And as he said, we get to work with customers. So we see tons of use cases across the community, across the customer base, on things that you're trying to do, areas you're maybe getting stuck on, or things we can learn together. So today we wanted to focus on some filtering strategies. We've got some cool new features that were released recently last year. A lot of you are probably aware of them with fixed function and variables, but also some features that Dan, you can go over. I'll turn the time over to you here in just a second, but some tips and tricks that may be helpful for you to consider as we have sort of learned in in interacting with Domo customers. So, Dan, maybe let me turn the time to you to kick off the presentation, and then I'll hang out here and we can kind of have the conversation together. But I'll let you lead out on kicking this off for the group here.
Cool.
Hey, Dan, before you get started, sorry, I'm jumping in and interjecting.
No problem.
If you have a comment or question throughout this live stream, we'd like you to put that in the comment section below on whatever platform you're watching. So Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, if you're watching on the community page, add those questions in. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll throw them in to the session as we go. So if there's something that jumps out at you, a comment, a suggestion, or even just a question that you have for Dan and Jacob, you have them for the next 30 minutes. Let's utilize that time, and we'll be able to interject and kind of answer those as they come in. So I wanted to make sure we said that before we got started. Dan, take it away. I'll get out. You've heard enough from me. I'm getting out of the way. I'm going to let you two take it over. Thanks again, guys.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Eddie. All right. So today we wanted to talk about dashboarding, and this is obviously bread and butter for Domo, right? But we want to talk about dashboarding really from the perspective of a couple of different personas or audiences, right? User types. There's obviously more than just two, but for the sake of our conversation today, we'll talk about two of these. One I'm calling data consumers, right? So these might be executives or business unit managers. And when they come to a dashboard, they're looking for some really specific piece of information. Probably they've already told you what that information is, that what the number is that they're looking for. And so our job is to just present to them the number they are looking for, the metric that they are looking for. It's going to be top line metrics. And these people want access to this information as quickly as possible with as few clicks as possible. They're really looking for a curated data experience, right? So that's our first persona, data consumers. The second I'm calling data explorers. And so these are people who are maybe managers or individual contributors. These are more of the analyst type. When they come to a dashboard, they are coming with questions, right? And we want to create dashboards that encourage them to ask and find answers to their questions. They're really looking for insights hidden in the data. They don't necessarily know exactly what the metric is. They are on a data exploration, right? And so when we create dashboards for this persona, we want to create an interactive dashboard experience that's going to allow them to drill and filter and slice and all those kinds of things as they go looking for insight in their data. So I've got a couple of demos that I want to walk through. Each of these focused on one demo for each of these different persona types. And we're going to cover a number of different pieces of like Domo functionality and methodology. Anyway, this will be great to go through with you. So first of all, let's take a look at this this sales dashboard that I put together for sort of an RVP type audience. So this is our data consumer. So I'm just going to open up this page, and let's see.
Hey Dan, can you zoom your browser in just a little bit?
Yeah, thank you.
There's a little. Thanks.
Yep, good call.
And hey, Jason, good to see you too.
That's better, I assume.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, great. So this first dashboard, this is the one we've created for our data consumer type. So in this case, it's going to be a regional vice presidents of a sales organization. And I want to just point out a couple of different things that I've done here to really create, again, a curated experience for this type of persona. So first of all, let's talk about some of the requirements that they might have had for me when I created this, right? They want a single dashboard where they can see all of their top level metrics. So you can see I'm showing sales, and I'm showing pacing to target, and I've also got a view into discounting, okay? They want to easily compare performance across districts, okay? And I'm showing districts here across the bottom. Because they want to be able to hold their sales teams accountable for hitting their targets and things like that. And they'd also really like to access to this information and only the information that's pertinent to them with as few clicks as possible, okay? So, and that's the part we're gonna walk through here to begin with. So right now, I'm showing all of the districts in our sales organization. This is, by the way, this is just mocked up data. And there's a couple of different ways that we could make this really clean and accessible to our RVP audience. So I'm going to go into edit mode here. And whoops, excuse me, my mistake. I'm going to go into filter options. Right now I have the filter bar suppressed, so I'm not showing it at all. Let me turn it back on. And now that I've done that, you can see that previously I created these filter views. Okay, so this is a really nice way of, again, curating content for a particular audience. So if I'm a regional vice president in the East region, I'm not particularly interested in what's going on in the Central or West region. When I come here, I want to be able to get to the East region as quickly as possible, and filter views are a good way of doing that. So I can just click on the East region filter view option there, and you can see the entire dashboard filters to just my region. And anyway, this is one way of presenting that curated experience for my users. A couple of other things I want to point out. One is that I have disabled filtering basically anywhere else on this dashboard. Again, the RVP organization has already told me I just want my region, right? They don't need a whole lot of ability to do additional filtering. And so to eliminate the possibility for confusion or misunderstanding or anything like that, I've really disabled filtering in most other places. So in a minute, I'll show you that I'm not going to allow filtering by clicking on this card. I'll show you here back in the filter options. I'm not going to allow adding new filters. I'm not going to allow the global date filter, right? I've really buttoned this up pretty tight. And that's, again, because they've told us exactly what they want. I've also, and we can also take a look at, excuse me, let's go into dashboard edit mode. And I just want to point out a couple of other features that can be helpful in this type of thing. That's going to be interaction settings and filter exceptions. So with filter exceptions, you can see in this case, I am allowing filtering, but in another case, you might not want a particular card to be filtered, say, when that filter view is selected, right? Maybe I want to have a card that does show me all 3 regions, and it's not going to be filtered when a user filters to a particular region, because we want to keep that view of all 3 regions, say for benchmarking purposes or something like that, right? And so that's something we could accomplish using filter exceptions. The other thing I want to point out here is interaction settings. And you can see this is where we can do things like we can configure drill in place. And that's how I've got it configured right now. The default, though, would be to just enable interactive filtering, right? Or interaction filtering between cards. And again, I already mentioned I didn't necessarily want a lot of filtering. And so I've gone with this drill in place option. And that allows us to, now that we're looking at individual districts, I can drill into a district. And now I can see within the Atlanta district, I can see how individual reps are performing, right? This is allowing the reps to dig in just, or excuse me, the RVPs to dig in just a little bit, but this is basically meeting their requirements. Now, there is another way that we could deliver this really curated experience. So I've done it using filter views, right? But the other option might be to use PDP. So right now, I do not have PDP enabled on this data. And so anyone that comes to this dashboard has access to any of this data, right? And we can filter between which region we want to see. But another way of accomplishing that is by enabling PDP. And so off the screen, I'm going to enable PDP on this data set. And I've already placed this user in the East region, okay, using PDP. And now when I refresh this, I'm only going to see the East region, right? And in fact, if I was to filter to, say, the West region, I'm going to get this message that there's no data in the filtered range. That's as expected, right? And so that being the case, suddenly we no longer need the filter bar at all, right? So what we've done now is we've used PDP as a method for presenting this curated view to the RVPs, so they can only see their own regions because they've told us that's what they're really interested in. So we talked about, let me just look at my notes here, make sure I covered everything. We talked about disallowing filtering. We talked about filter exceptions. We talked about drill in place. Yeah, that's kind of, I think, what I wanted to cover on this demo. Jacob, you'll let me know if you see any questions pop up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I
Cool.
think just as a call out too, some of these things like removing the filter bar or the global date filter or preventing a card from being interacted with or used as a filter, those are all great tips. I think that can, put some control over the user experience that you're designing in the dashboard. So
cool. Yeah, thanks. All right, so let's actually move on then to the second demo. And this is the demo that we've built out.
Dan. Sorry,
Yeah,
Dan, I'm interjecting. Just
no
wanted to again thank everybody for joining us. Huge audience across Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter for our very first Lunch and Learn. So I definitely want to just pop in and say thank you for everybody that's joining. Make sure you're sharing, you're liking, you're commenting, lots of interaction for this session as Dan kind of has a natural transition point to the next demo. We did go ahead and put an article that's public to view for Domo support on filter views. So if you are watching and you need some more context on that a little bit later, there's obviously some great content resource there for you. Casey, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, you saw Jason's comment earlier, our good friend Jason. Glad to see everyone here today. Be a part of the chat, be a part of the comments, the live stream. We appreciate everybody. But I just wanted to call those out before we got too deep into the woods here. So Dan and Jacob, thanks again. I'll let you continue.
Thanks, Eddie. Okay, so let's move over then to our second demo. This is the dashboard I've built out for more of the data exploration use case or persona. So I've put together this discounting deep dive dashboard. And this is obviously a different persona of user, right? It's a different type of Domo user. It's also a different person in the organization. And they've got an entirely separate, entirely different set of requirements, both in terms of the data they see, but also in terms of the experience they want to have. So this team is particularly interested in discounting patterns, right? And they don't even necessarily know what they're looking for other than that they are looking for patterns, right? So it's not going to work to present them with some highly curated, really buttoned down, really streamlined experience, because that's not going to allow them to do the exploration they need to do as they're looking for patterns, right? So this is less about reporting, more about exploration. And they've told us in particular a couple of things. One, obviously, they need access to all the data. So like that PDP approach that we used before is not appropriate here. I've gone ahead and I've removed PDP from the dashboard or from the data set. They've also told us that they want to change the way they slice and dice the data, and obviously that they also want to be able to filter. So let's take a look at, and I'm sorry, when I'm zoomed in so far, this dashboard doesn't look super awesome. I should have prefaced this all by saying I'm not a dashboard design kind of guy. Some of you are probably looking at these dashboards and thinking how ugly they are, and you're probably right. But hopefully they're good enough at least to demonstrate the functionality and the concepts. Okay, so how can we put together this dashboard that's going to encourage asking and answering questions, and it's going to enable data exploration? So several things I want to point out. First of all, I've made heavy use of page filters and also filter cards, right? So these cards across the top are just for filtering purposes. I also have made light use of filter views, just with this default filter view. And this is just a nice way of resetting, basically, all the filters we may have put in place and whatever else. This is just an easy way of returning to ground zero, right? Remove all the filters. That's basically all I've done with the filter views there. I've also made use of a new feature called Domo Variables, and this has come out just within the last few months. I've talked with a number of customers about it, demonstrated it for them, and everybody's excited about this. I'm guessing that most of you on the call today have been exposed to Domo Variables, but maybe not. And anyway, so we'll get into variables in more detail here in just a minute. I have restricted the interaction between cards, and I want to show you that again. So if I go into dashboard edit mode and we come to change interaction, you can see on all of these charts, I've actually disabled card interactions. And that's because I don't have a drill path. There's no place I want to link them to per se, but also I don't want to allow clicking on the chart and then filtering the rest of the dashboard. And that's there are a few reasons for that, but one reason is I've put all of my filtering at the top, right? And I am trying to provide some guidance to my users about how to interact with this dashboard. And so I've removed any kind of interactive filtering when clicking on the charts. Okay, I also disallowed the global date filter, and once again, we can do that in the filter options. I have allowed adding of new filters. Again, these are data explorers. They need to be able to explore, but I've disallowed global date filters. And then the other thing I've made use of is the fixed function. The fixed function, or I guess the fixed family of functions, are relatively new to beast mode. It was either the July or the October release of last year, but I'm going to show you how we can use fixed functions and both for purposes of level of detail of calculations, but also in terms of accepting calculations from filters. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a minute. Anyway, the two new features here, new on the Domo platform, but also new relative to the dashboard that we looked at before. So two new features that we really want to get into are Domo variables and fixed functions. And let's take a look at both of those now. So these are obvious. Yeah, hey, Eddie.
I just want to make sure that we call out Mark's question here. And we might plan on going over this later, but I wanted to jump in. Mark Snodgrass, our good friend Mark on YouTube, has asked, we'll plan on going over this, but can you talk a little bit about when you might want to use display mode, a fixed versus auto width on these dashboards? Be a great call out.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So what Mark's referring to is we can go into edit dashboard. And if we look at options, display mode, we have fixed width versus auto width. So by default, it's going to be in fixed width. If I change to auto, let me just show you what that does. First of all, you can see that when we have the dashboard set in auto width mode, let me see if I can resize this. I'm not sure what that's going to do on the screen share. Okay, yeah, good. So when I resize my browser window, you can see that then all the content on the dashboard page is responsive, right? So it's all shrinking, but it's all filling the full width of the dashboard window. And that is not, and let me go back to, oops, sorry, wrong place. Go back into edit mode. Let me put this back into the default mode, which is fixed width. So I can just show you the difference. First of all, you can see that it takes up less space on the screen, right? So I've got these margins on the sides. And now when I shrink this down, you can see it's not responsive to the browser window size. So that's the difference between those two. Mark, in terms of when I would recommend using one or the other, I'm not sure candidly I have a great answer for that. I'll tell you the use case I'm most familiar with where they wanted to use the variable width was just they were trying to put so much content on the screen that the fixed width just didn't give them the real estate they wanted. And so that customer went with the variable width because it just allowed them to fit more content on the screen, allowed them to get rid of some of those margins.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I would agree that that auto width to expand out can be good if you're going to display it like on a bigger monitor. If you want to build that curated view where you've kind of laid things out exactly how you want and you're scheduling it as a report or you're pushing it out, that might be when you'd lock it down a little bit more to make it fixed. But even at the beginning of this, Dan, when I was like, hey, can you zoom in a little bit? There was a lot of space on the sides on that particular screen. So that would have, potentially been a solution there as well to go auto width. I have had clients who turn it off because it didn't give them as much control over the layout, but both of them have both of them have benefits. So thanks for calling that out, Mark. It's good. It's a good tip.
Thanks, Jacob. Okay, so let's turn our focus to variables and fixed functions. So most of these 6 cards here, all but one of them, are slicers, right? So these are just used for applying a filter. So I can, filter to the central region, for example, right? Or I can filter to, a particular product or whatever it may be. Pretty standard, pretty familiar functionality. This card here is actually, instead of being a filter, this is a variable control. By default, this variable control has the value of none, but you can see I've presented a few options here. And what these options are driving is the way the data is going to be sliced in the visualizations below. So here you can see I'm just looking at the total number, right? Or I can see the same thing here in this table card. If I change my variable value, let's say I want to slice by region. When I do that, that updates the nature of the visualization itself, right? So now across the top, I have my regions, and across the bottom, I have the districts within those regions. And I can see the same thing here in the table card below. Or maybe I want to look at this from the perspective, maybe I'm a product manager, and instead of looking at discounting by region, I'm interested in looking at discounting by product, right? So I can slice by product family, and now I've got product families across the top, and I've got individual products across the bottom. So this is a variable. Like I said, it's relatively new functionality, and it's super powerful, and I want to show you how it works. So to do that, let me go into edit mode on this card. So open it up in Analyzer. First thing I want to point out is variables are going to appear in Analyzer down with beast modes. So let's first open up this variable. I just want to show you how it's configured. So first, I've given it a name. This is the name of the variable. I've specified that it has a text data type, and I've given it a default value of none. And then I've specified that when a user interacts with this variable, I want them to interact with it using the drop-down menu, right? And I finally specified all of the options that should appear in that drop-down list. And then here we can see this is a preview of what this control is going to look like. Okay, pretty easy to create variables. One thing to understand about variables is that they are global, so they'll be accessible across the Domo instance. You want to keep that in mind when you think about naming, for example. And depending on what type of data it is, so in this case it's text, there are going to be various options of control types, right? So for a text type variable, I can use things like drop downs or pills or radio buttons. If I was to choose a number, I'd be able to use a slider, for example. If I was to change it to a date, then we have a calendar control. Let's stick with drop down for now. Now, variables are only useful, or the way that we use variables is within beast mode calculations. So I already showed you that. In fact, let me add the control side panel here. So here within the analyzer, I can experiment, right? I can do this live. We change this to region. Okay, so just as a reminder, we've got regions across the top. We've got districts across the bottom. If I look at my 2 dimensions here, we can see that we have dimension and dimension 2 are giving us those 2 values. Those are both beast mode calculations, and let's take a look at those. So dimension is here. Let's open that up. Okay, so this is how we use a variable. This is the variable, and I've just used it in a case statement. I say, when the variable value is region, then give me the values in the region column. And when the variable value is district, then just give me the values in the district column, and so on and so forth. And I've got something really similar in the dimension 2. I'll just show you that for comparison. I've said when the variable value equals region, then give me the district. So this is essentially giving me one level of drill in depth, right? So if I choose region, dimension is going to give me region, dimension 2 is going to give me district. If I choose district, then district 2 is going to give me rep. Again, just one level further in granularity. Jacob, did you have a comment you wanted to add?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, looking at this, I think there's sort of a a chart setting in here that I wasn't familiar with for a while, and that's the trellis
oh yeah,
settings.
yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
So like this chart, how it has two elements on the axis there, you can if you scroll down on your chart properties, there was is it called trellis and tiered?
Yep.
I'm trying to remember the exact settings there, but the ability to throw another category on there to plot is a nice tip, as well as just kind of baking that into your case statement to say, here's the hierarchy. If I'm looking at a region, then the breakdown for the category is the district.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. Thanks for pointing that out.
Jacob and Dan, we did have a comment come in, a question from LinkedIn. And if anything that I've learned about trying to pronounce people's names that I have no clue how to pronounce them, this is one of them. We'll just call him Mr. Das at this point. Can we use more HTML code now? Use dsimple BRB tag before, and that's worked out. Any comments or questions for Mr. Das here on LinkedIn. And we have a huge LinkedIn audience. So everybody, thank you for joining us on LinkedIn as we stream across all of our social platforms today.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for the question. So you can use some HTML tags in some places. Okay, I'll say it's relatively limited, but let me give you an example of where we can use HTML. So it's going to be in, if we go to the tables and text boxes, chart types, specifically the HTML table. So in the HTML table, this is obviously not the view ultimately that we're going to want to look at, but the HTML table does allow you to use some HTML tags like in a beast mode calculation. And I'll give you an example of where you might use this. Maybe you've got a value, and you want to format that value to be, green if it's greater than 0 or red if it's less than 0 or something like that. You could do that in an HTML table, probably using like a text formatting or maybe a span tag. I'm by no means an HTML guy, but I have done a little bit of light HTML work within Domo, and that's an example of something I've seen work. Another place where you can use HTML is in summary numbers. So the typical summary number is going to take some aggregation of something. And in fact, summary numbers require an aggregation. But you could create a beast mode calculation where, in fact, let me just do this for you really quickly. I'm sure I won't be able to make this work because, live demos and I'm no good at HTML. But if we were to create a, let's go formatted summary number. And let's say the summary number we want to show is just the sum of the amount. And we want to, we want it to be, I don't know, bold or something. See, everybody see how bad my HTML is. Span, and then it's going to be, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try. Here's where we could enter like a CSS, or we could specify like a font size attribute or a font color attribute and that type of thing. And then we could close the span. But then the trick is that all of this stuff has to be concatenated in a string, right? So it's going to be something like this.
Yeah, that's a good tip, Dan. So being able to add some HTML formatting to a summary number, we've seen people do that with line breaks where they want to have a couple of things, in their summary number. Domo did come out with the multi-summary number chart type to sort of address that. There are some challenges to, I will kind of throw out there to HTML code in summary numbers, and that on the mobile apps, they don't always display properly. So this is, but this looks great on the desktop and the web browser displays. And I would also just throw one more thing out there with HTML. So you may or may not have heard of DDX bricks, but that gives you like this experience where you can edit the HTML, JavaScript, and the CSS for a totally customized chart type. And that would be, more of the power user for, I want to use this chart from some JavaScript library like D3, and I want full control over the HTML for the visual. So that's extending it out maybe a little bit further as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. On the subject of like the custom summary numbers, the multi-part summary numbers, that used to be a thing that I think we heard more, but now with pages, where we can do layouts, and with like multi-value cards and stuff like that. Now, frankly, I think that's maybe a better way of doing kind of the summary number desire, right? To summarize a single value kind of in the top left. I think you're maybe going to be better served. Certainly, you're going to have more control over format and look and feel and all those kinds of things if you do that using like a single value chart type or a multi-value chart type rather than just using the standard summary number. Cool. All right, so we're starting to run just a little bit low on time, but I really do want to talk about the fixed function because it's so great. Let's tell you what. Let me just bail out.
Yeah, that's just fine. I've got a few more. I've got some more time as well. We can roll over on this, and
cool.
And anybody, and because the fixed functions is really awesome. We dropped a link in the chat for a deep dive on this as well, but I want to see what you have put together here, Dan.
Sure. So first of all, I need to demonstrate what's actually happening here. Okay, so let's view our data by region, right? And so we're going to get region across the top and districts across the bottom. And you can see I've got two metrics that I'm showing. One is the contribution to discount, and two is the contribution to total discount. Right now, with no filters in place, these two metrics are obviously giving us the same thing. But let me show you what happens when I filter. So let's say, actually, I'm not interested in all products. I'm only interested in the bits and bobs. So when I do that, now the data I'm looking at has obviously changed, right? And now the data I'm looking at, sorry, let me not float my mouse around all over the screen. So this contribution to discount and this contribution to total discount are obviously giving us different results. The contribution to discount has been affected by my adding that filter, whereas the contribution to total discount has not been. So let me remove that filter and just show you that. So let's say, for example, we've got 23.9 and 10.3. Let's remove that filter. Oh, and you know what? It did affect them both. I'm sorry. Hang on. I did this wrong. Let me grab the region calculate, or the region filter. Let's use that instead. My mistake. Okay. So now let's say we're only interested in the East region. Now when I apply this filter, this contribution to discount, if you look at those numbers, you see that those are all summing up to 100%, okay? Whereas the contribution to total discount is not. You'll also notice that the contribution to total discount numbers did not change when I filtered, okay? So let me prove that to you. Here's New York at 21.9%. If I remove that filter, you can see, there it is, New York. You can see New York at 21.9%. So how did we accomplish that? We did that using fixed functions. Sorry it took me so long to demonstrate the behavior. So let's go down and let's look at the percent contribution. Let me just do this, give myself a little bit more real estate. Let's go down and look at these two calculations. So here's our percent contribution to discount, and here is our percent contribution to total discount. We're going to take a look at both of these. You're going to see they're very similar with just one small difference. So percent contribution to discount. All I'm doing here is I'm calculating the discount for a particular line item, right? So for a particular region or district. And then I'm calculating the total discount. And I'm calculating the total discount using the fixed function. So you can see it's the same calculation. It's the quantity times the unit price minus the actual amount paid. The difference is that in the denominator, I have fixed both of these at a specific level of detail and with a specific filter condition. And the level of detail here is total. So with no argument, fixed is just giving me the total number, right? So the denominator is giving me the total discount across all records. The numerator is giving me just the discount within, however we're slicing the card within a particular district. So this is giving us, this is a percent of total calculation. Now, if I look at the other, let's look at the percent total or percent contribution to total discount. This is very similar. In fact, the numerator is identical. The only difference in the denominator is I've got this argument to the fixed function, and it is filter allow date. And so what this is really telling us is that the denominator is only going to accept filters from the date column. It's going to ignore any other filters. Okay, so the net of that is when I apply a filter, that contribution to total discount number is going to ignore that filter. And therefore, these numbers are going to remain the same regardless of how I filter, right? So now what this allows me to do is I can say, oh, within the central region, I can see that, boy, Kansas City is a huge contributor to total discount within the central region, but it's only 8.5% in terms of its contribution across the country, right? So this is one way where we've used fixed functions. We've done two things. First, we've done a percent of total calculation, but two, we've used that filter allow. And I should say there are a couple of other flavors of that. There's also filter filter deny. There's also filter none. Each of these are a slightly different way of accomplishing this idea of restricting or preventing a particular field from filtering a particular beast mode calculation. It's super handy. This type of thing would have been really, really, really difficult without these fixed functions. And it's a really great way, again, of allowing your end users to really explore the data and see it in ways that it would have been hard to do prior.
Yeah, and Dan, I would just maybe add to that. We've seen a lot of customer feedback on this point, where this is opening up use cases that weren't previously possible to even engineer in your data beforehand. So if you have controls over what gets filtered out or what gets included in a card when you filter down. So just like you demonstrated, if you filter down by the central region, traditionally the entire card and the subset of data in there is going to be hard filtered to central. These controls allow you to access that grand total of data, but still have, and kind of maintain both. So there's a lot of use cases for this. I had a customer last week. You and I were chatting with him. He almost fell off his chair. He's like, oh my goodness, I don't have to go back to, creating multiple data sets and preventing filters. I can just do it all with fixed function. In that case, very similar. He wanted to kind of keep in the top right the total value that was kind of the benchmark, and then filter his dashboard down and see, the region or the product detail, the category that he was drilling into in the context of some of those bigger numbers.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. Yeah, super handy functionality. Honestly, the advent of Domo variables and the fixed function, the combination of those two really feels like a really significant step forward in terms of Domo's ability to really meet the requirements of this more analytical user type, this more analytical persona. Anyway, that's all I had to cover in terms of demo. Maybe let's just go back and take a quick look at some takeaways. And really, this is to just recap some of what we already talked about, right? We want to design dashboards for our audience. So we talked about consumers versus explorers. Hopefully, you got the impression that Domo really has a lot of functionality that supports your stakeholders whatever persona they may be. When it comes to the curated experience, we can talk about PDP and filter views, card interaction settings, card and page filter settings, and filter exceptions. For the interactive experience, we can look at things like filter views and page filters and filter cards, variables, and then what we looked at last there was the fixed function, for example, using that filter allow method. Anyway, thanks so much. I think that pretty well wraps it up for me. Are there more questions that came across that we didn't get a chance to answer?
You know what, Dan, I'm actually kind of going through, there were a few people, streaming issues or whatever, but we were all fine on our end as far as the stuff that I was kind of looking at monitoring. You can never tell, there's lots of people watching in different environments, but we seem to hold strong on our end. Dan and Jacob, I cannot thank you enough. You've been going strong for almost 45 minutes on our very first Lunch and Learn here at Domo. You guys have taken, obviously, a huge chunk out of your day and in preparation leading up to this. We can't wait to have you and some of your other colleagues on the TSM teams coming over to do more of these as we kind of ramp up this community content on these Lunch and Learn live streams, our very first across Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure you're liking and subscribing and commenting and doing all the things and sharing this with your networks inside your organization. Dan and Jacob, any parting words? Obviously, a huge thank you to both of you, as I kind of stated there at the beginning.
Thanks for having us. This was a lot of fun. Great opportunity. Hopefully it was valuable to everybody that tuned in. And like I said, there's a whole lot here, including some of these new features, variables, and fixed that really unlock kind of the next level of data exploration and analysis in Domo. Anyway, thanks a lot for having us.
For sure. Yeah. We have lots of folks coming in and giving. Sorry, Jacob, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just love to get the interaction going. Lots of folks on LinkedIn popping in and saying, great content. Love how it was presented. This is how it should be done. I will call John out a little bit. Not necessarily a webinar, a little bit different with all of this audience interaction and some kind of organic social excitement built around some of the things we're doing at Domo, but love the call out. John, you can call it whatever you want. You'll call it a webinar. I'll let you.
We love you, John.
I love John. Yeah, he knows I'm ribbing him a little bit. Another Domo employee. And then we also have other comments coming in. Thank you all so much. This is extremely awesome. Jacob, any parting words before we end the stream today?
Well, I just love engaging with the community and would love to hear your stories for how you're using filter strategies and fixed and variables, any tips and tricks that you would have to post in the dojo as well. So thanks, Nadina. See your comment there. And thanks a lot, Dan, for sharing those tips and tricks.
For sure. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much again. We really appreciate it. Everybody that's been watching, make sure you like, subscribe, do all of the things as we continue to do these every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm committing that for at least a little bit as we kind of ramp up new community initiatives and new community guidelines. As you guys come on and continue to interact with us. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Dan. This was building curated and interactive Domo dashboards on all of our social media channels. We can't wait to see you on Tuesday of next week. Be sure to check out all of the social channels so you can see what comes next.